Hello guys, I'd like to talk a little bit about the different race and species choices available in Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. There are 27 races total, and that is not going to change. That's one of the kind of set design ideas for the game, that they always want to have 27 races. Now, these come and go quite a lot. There's been many additions and removals over the years that Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup has been out. So I'm just talking about the current lineup as of version 0.33. So that may change in the future. We very recently in this version got 2 new races added and 2 removed. So anyone who's played a previous version might not recognize a few of these races. And if you're watching this maybe a few years in the future, some of these races may already be gone or have been replaced or changed by something else. So specifically, this is version 0.33. However, I will say that the races that do remain don't tend to change too much, and often when there's a substitution, that substitution still fills a similar niche and has similar kind of stats and play style as the one it replaced, which I will discuss a little bit later. But let's get started. So one thing when you're choosing a race is on this menu, you'll see them split into 3 different categories of simple, intermediate, and advanced. Now, this is not necessarily showing the difficulty. It does show it in a way, as in the simple races are generally going to be a little bit easier for someone to play versus the more advanced ones. But again, that doesn't mean that they're better or worse, like the advanced ones are weaker, the simple ones are stronger. The main idea is that the simple races tend to be a little bit less complex or a little bit more forgiving to play. Like you can play them and maybe make mistakes and so on, and it won't punish you as much. Meanwhile, the more advanced races, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful with how you play because they can punish mistakes a little bit more. And that's really the only difference, I would say. There's no problem choosing an advanced race if you want to play that one, or if you find it interesting or whatever. It doesn't really make a difference, to be honest. I would say just choose whatever you like, and what kind of play style you want to play as. That's another thing too. But really, I don't think it matters too much. So again, we have the simple races, which are the Mountain Dwarf, the Minotaur, the Merfolk, Gargoyles, Draconians, Trolls, Deep Elves, Armataurs, and Gnolls. We have the intermediate races, which are humans, Kobolds, Revnants, Demonspawn, Djinni, Spriggans, Tengu, Oni, and Barachi, or Barachi, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, to be honest. And the advanced races, the Coglin, the Vine Stalker, the Poltergeist, Demigod, Formicid, Naga, Octopode, Felid, and Mummy. So we'll talk about all of these in this video, and then at the end I'll give a few recommendations. But as I go through each of the races, I will also kind of talk a little bit about what I think might be a fun or interesting play style for that specific race. So let's get started here with the simple races first. Let's start with the Mountain Dwarf. Now, Mountain Dwarfs are a pretty easy to play race, I would say. I think they're a good race for a new player. They have pretty decent stats, strength of 10, int of 8, and dex of 5. These are just their base stats. Depending what class you choose, these will change a little bit as well. And of course, you can increase them throughout the game as you play. Their first ability is Runic Magic, which basically reduces the encumbrance that armor gives for the sake of spell success. So they can wear heavier armor and still cast spells, unlike maybe other races. Other races will get a big spell penalty due to the encumbrance of their armor, but dwarves suffer a lot less than that. So you can play a heavy armored caster with these guys a little bit easier than maybe some other race, for example. Another feature they have is artifact enchanting. So if they find an artifact, they can actually enchant those. Normally you can't enchant artifacts, and these are only random artifacts as well. If you find like a unique artifact, you can enchant it anyways, but usually they're quite good. But if you find just like a random artifact in the dungeon, you can use enchant weapon armor to enchant it, which is quite good. And this also includes things if you're worshipping Ashinzari. If you curse an item, it becomes an artifact, so you can actually enchant those using this ability as well. Now, talking about recommended classes, the ones they recommend in the game specifically are fighters, monks, berserkers, cinder acolytes, reavers, forge rites, and fire elementalists, as well as these are the aptitudes they have, meaning these are the skills that they tend to prefer or have a bit of a bonus in. So they have a bonus in fighting, mason flails, axes, staves, armor, shields, necromancy, forgecraft, fire magic, invocations, and evocations. So you can see the biggest bonuses are for invocations, as well as your forgecraft, fire magic, and then your 2 weapon skills, maces and flails. When you're playing this kind of character, to be honest, I think a good option could be something that's a little bit of a mix of playstyles, kind of a more warrior focused, but definitely using some magic. Going for a monk could not be too bad of an idea, especially if you pick up a god early. I think a pretty fun playstyle for this is playing a monk or a fighter and finding Quaslal as your god. And you can basically just become a very tanky build. I would go for definitely heavy armor, maybe axes or hammers. Axes, I think, is probably a bit better for being a tank a little bit. But going for that kind of play style and having Quaslal to basically just nuke everybody around you and just not giving a shit about the noise. So I think that could be a pretty fun play style for Mountain Dwarves. Going with something a little bit more magic focused, like a Forge Rite, could also be pretty good. You can craft a lot of little followers and things like that, little things to help you in the dungeon. Fire Lentis is fine as well. Doesn't really matter. I think Mountain Dwarf can do quite well with a lot of things, but I do think probably a very fun playstyle with this would be going for just a very heavy fighter or maybe a monk and seeing if you could find the god Quaslal. That would be pretty cool as well to help you out a little bit. Or other god options could be pretty good as well for them. If you're looking for a fairly easy character to start playing as, I would say this is pretty good. Compared to, for example, a Minotaur, you do at least have some magic aptitude, so you can mix in like a little bit of magic in there. And I would say both of them are quite good at melee fighting. So let's move on to the Minotaur, the kind of iconic newbie class, or the newbie race, I would say. Minotaurs are quite strong. They have strength of 12, int of 5, and dex of 5, which are pretty bad. They have horns, which means they get an innate headbutt counterattack. That means while you're attacking, sometimes they will also headbutt the enemy, but also means they can't wear a helmet. These are the recommended classes for them. Mostly warrior-focused classes, fighter, gladiator, monk, hunter, and then berserker as well. The Minotaur Berserker, the MEBE, is again kind of the iconic newbie class, and definitely if you play this, you're going to shred at least the early levels of the dungeon. But once you start getting into the later game, Berserker does tend to become a little bit more technical, I would say. I wouldn't say it's bad. Berserker is a great class and a great ability. Trog is an amazing god. I should mention the Zealots, they start with a god worshipped, and specifically Berserker starts worshipping Trog. But you can also find Trog in the dungeon as a fighter, for example, and worship him at any time. Just the Berserker begins the game worshipping Trog. But I would say Trog is a very technical god, especially as you get into the late game. But in the early game, it can make things a lot easier. Maybe a fighter would be a little bit easier to go through because it's more balanced. You can pick a different god to kind of offset your poor kind of magical abilities or your ability to escape situations you can't just like fight your way out of. So I think a Minotaur fighter could be pretty good. Another good god option could be Okawaru. So a fighter of Okawaru is, again, a very iconic class. And I think Mifi, Minotaur fighter worshipping Okawaru, is a really easy, kind of easy to understand and very strong class to play if you ever want to try this out. In terms of their aptitudes, they basically have every aptitude for all the physical fighting skills. Fighting, mace and flails, axes, polearm, staves, unarmed combat. Throwing is neutral, but throwing is always good to train up. I mean, for any kind of fighter, having throwing as your secondary kind of option for range attacks is always great. They have short blades, long blades, range weapons. I mean, these guys can even be great hunters, to be honest. Armor, dodging, shield, basically everything except stealth and magic they can be good at. Though they do have a neutral at invocations, so they can be quite good with their god powers as well. So I would say a Minotaur is a great class if you want to be focused on melee. Maybe mix in a little bit of throwing in there as well, or maybe even some ranged weapons. You can pick up a sling or like a bow or something to augment your fighting ability a little bit. Again, always having a ranged option is great for any kind of melee class because you want to be able to start the combat away from you and then finish them off in melee rather than fight in melee initially. And of course, picking up a god is always great and can really offset the weaknesses of the Minotaur in general. Next is the Merfolk. Now, Merfolk have pretty balanced stats, strength of 8, int of 7, and dex of 9. They have the nimble swimmer trait, which means they're amphibious. They can enter any kind of water. They're also faster in water. They get a 50% stealth bonus and a 25% evasion bonus as well. They also have a Mer tail, but this is specifically in the water. When they're on land, their tail will disappear, and that means they get an extra tail slap while they're in water only. These are the recommended classes for them: Gladiator, Berserker, Shapeshifter, Summoner, Ice Elementalist, and Alchemist. Out of these, a Gladiator is also a quite decent class. Gladiator, Merfolk Gladiator of Okuaru is a really good kind of play style. If you're more for a nimble fighter, going for that, taking a spear or trident, because spears or tridents have a reach. You can use that to hit enemies a little bit further away. You can often get some throwing weapons like darts or nets to help you out of battle a little bit. And of course, Okuaru will benefit your fighting abilities and give you tons of throwables as well. So I think that's a really great class. If you want something a little bit more magic focused, definitely an Ice Elementalist or an Alchemist, I think, are all both quite good. Merfolk Alchemist used to be my favorite class kind of combo for a long time. When I first started playing Dungeon Crawl, they didn't have Alchemist. They had something called Venom Mage or something similar with like poison magic. And so I would often play a Merfolk using the poison magic a lot, and that was pretty good. I think that's a pretty nice start. It's pretty slow, but it is quite good, at least until you get to Lair and the first branches, maybe like the Spider Nest or something like that, where a lot of the enemies have poison resistance. But for the first chunk of the game, the Alchemist can be quite good, and then once it starts to drop off, you can start mixing in other things as well. So I think that can also be a pretty good option. Talking about their aptitudes, they have an aptitude for fighting, as well as pole arms, a big aptitude for pole arms. So definitely going for a spear or trident is great with these guys. As well as a small aptitude for unarmed combat. They have some bonuses for short blades, long blades, dodging, stealth, alchemy, ice magic, invocations, and shapeshifting. So a lot of different options for you as a Merfolk. I think Merfolks are a decent kind of multi sort of class type character you can play. They can dip into a lot of useful things, and definitely they benefit a lot from mixing things up. Maybe going for a more stealth focused stabber character with a little bit of magic. You can go for a fully melee character, again mixing in some other things as well. So you can have a lot of versatility with Merfolk, which is quite good. Next are the Gargoyles. Gargoyles are a really great, I think, beginner class. They're pretty fragile. They have very low health, but they have quite high stats: 11 strength, int 8, and dex 5. Again, 20% less HP, but they do have poison immunity, electricity resistance. They resist negative energy. They resist torment. They take half damage from torment. They resist petrification because their body is made of stone, so they resist any kind of stone, any spells that turn you to stone. They also don't breathe, and they don't have any blood, and they're immune to sleep, so they can't get any effects from like darts or something that can affect your blood, basically. But they are vulnerable to shatter type spells because they are made of stone. They also have an innate armor class boost per level, so as they get leveled up, their armor class will innately get a little bit of a boost. And at level 14, they gain the big wings, which gives them permanent flight, which is quite good. That means by the time you get to the lair around the mid game, you can fly around and basically avoid any kind of problems on the floor, like something to slow you down, for example, water or lava or anything like that. So that is quite good for them. It also gives them a lot more mobility and makes it harder to get ensnared or something like that. As for recommended classes, they recommend a fighter, gladiator, monk, berserker, fire elementalist, earth elementalist, or reaver. I mean, these are all pretty good. I would say Earth Elementalist, Gargoyle Earth Elementalist, like the iconic kind of combo. It's a really powerful, easy caster class, and it will suit your abilities quite well. To be honest, a Gargoyle Earth Elementalist is basically the mage equivalent to the Minotaur. Just the kind of low IQ blaster caster sort of playstyle. You are a little bit weaker because of your low HP, but I would say focus more on evasion rather than stacking big armor. Going for a little bit lighter set of armor and having a bit higher evasion will probably suit you a bit more. So something like that could be pretty good. And of course, you can mix in some other things later. Definitely the Earth Elementalist will make it easy to move around the map as well, which can help quite a lot to avoid damage. Basically, you want to avoid getting hit. You don't want to just stack your armor and make yourself really slow and have a difficult time casting. You want to focus on being mobile, especially once you get your wings, having the high evasion, high mobility with your wings, earth powers to be able to use like pass wall and stuff, and maybe even mixing some translocation magic, some warper magic could be quite good. I also think a gargoyle warper could be quite nice as well, because you do start with a few translocation spells, which could be quite nice for you. As for aptitudes, they get a few aptitudes. They get an aptitude for fighting, armor, shields, and stealth, as well as conjurations and earth magic, as well as invocations. The stealth bonus is quite nice. You could go for a kind of stealthy mage, and actually the stealth combined with earth magic is really nice. So if you go for an earth mage initially, you can actually play it almost like a stealthy stabber character, using things like pass wall to go through the wall and then stab an enemy before retreating back through the wall and so on like that. So that's actually an interesting play style for the Gargoyle. You can play it as a light evasive fighter, but using the earth magic instead of just pure stealth only. So focusing on stealth and earth magic initially to be able to supplement your stabbing ability. So I think that could be a very cool combo. And your weapon skills are all quite bad, to be honest. The only ones are neutral, like maces, flails, staves, unarmed combat. But the -1 for example, short blades doesn't really make a difference, honestly. Let's talk about the Draconians now. So Draconians are a very interesting race. They have a lot of different things going on, which can be a little bit difficult to go through, to be honest. But let's go through them. First of all, they can't wear any body armor or helmets due to their wings, as well as their kind of horns on their head, I guess, the shape of their head. They get an extra tail slap attack. They also have hard scales, which give them a bonus to their armor class, as well as additional bonuses as they level up. I guess their scales are getting harder as they're leveling up. They're cold-blooded, which means any kind of cold effects will slow them down a lot, which is very bad. So you need to be careful of things like wights or any kind of enemies who are using cold magic. They do get a breath attack as well as a color at level 7. So when you start the game, they'll be brown. And brown Draconians do have like no special abilities, but at level 7 they will get a color, and that color will have an associated breath attack. So going through the different colors, there's 8 different colors, and it's random, I should say, so you don't choose which color you get. So whatever color you get, you kind of have to make it work somehow. Red, you get a resist fire ability and a fire breath that will cause a small explosion on enemies hit. White gets resist cold, and you get a frost breath that will turn enemies into a block of ice. Green gets resist poison and a poison breath, which will also cause a kind of poison cloud, as well as gaining a stinger at level 14, which augments their tail slap. Yellow, they get resist corrosion. They'll have an acid breath, as well as an acidic saliva bite at level 14, and their acid breath will cause acid clouds upon contact as well. They also get an armor tail. Gray gets +5 to their armor class, as well as a kind of mud breath of sorts. They kind of shoot a ball of mud, which will slow down and kind of disorient enemies a little bit. They're also amphibious if they go gray. Black gets resist electricity. They get an arcing lightning bolt, which will jump from enemy to enemy. As well as level 14, they'll get big wings, which means they can fly continuously. The initial wings they have are too small to fly, so they can't actually like do anything with them. It does improve their evasion a little bit, but it doesn't actually let them fly. Purple, they get +40 to their willpower. They also have an immunity to dispel and resist draining MP. Their breath will also cause a large irresistible damage area, and also applies anti-magic to any enemies hit by it, and removes any buffs they might have. So purple is really interesting. I'd say the most interesting out of all of these. Lastly is pale. They resist steam and get a steam breath attack, which does damage to anyone who doesn't resist fire, basically. It's a heat-based kind of steam. The recommended classes for Draconians are Berserkers, Shapeshifters, Conjurers, Fire Elementalists, Ice, Air, and Earth Elementalists, as well as Alchemists. Now, one thing I will mention, even though it seems like these guys would be good mages, and they are actually quite good mages, their stats are pretty decent, Strength 10, Int 8, Dex 6, and they do have access to, a lot of magical abilities later. One thing I'll mention, I wouldn't recommend picking a mage class at the beginning. Maybe a Conjurer could be good, because Conjurers are very generic. But even then, I don't know. I think maybe going for another class initially, something that can give you a little bit more flexibility in the early game, and then you can move into magic a little bit later. And this is for one reason specifically. Specifically, they don't have really any aptitudes at the beginning of the game. They're all basically neutral. They have a little bit of a fighting and invocations aptitude, but they mostly gain their aptitudes later with their color. So when they get their color, they will gain or lose certain aptitudes based on that color. So until level 7, it's not really worth breaking into any specific group of magic, because once you do, the color you get might not really match with it, and then it might upset things a little bit, make it difficult for you, who knows. So I would say wait until a little bit later to start getting into magic. Maybe you find some books around the dungeon, maybe you can pick up a god or something like Revnant or whatever, or Sifmuna, I guess would be a good option for you to get more magic spells. That could help augment. So again, red will give you a bonus to your hydro magic and a detriment to your ice magic. White will give you a bonus to your ice magic, but remove your fire magic. Green gets a bonus to alchemy. Yellow gets a bonus to forge craft. Gray gets a bonus to earth magic, but detriment to air magic. Black gets a bonus to air magic, but detriment to earth magic. Purple gets a bonus to spell casting in general, as well as evocations and hexes, which is kind of like the go-to generic spell casting color, I guess. So if you get that, you can really just go for a big mage kind of play. While pale gets a small bonus to both fire and air, as well as evocations, which is also quite nice for casting a lot of different spells. So like I said, in the early game, I probably wouldn't pick a mage class. I mean, it would be nice to have some spells. Maybe if I was going to go for a spell class, going for something like a Reaver, or even like a Hexsinger or a Warper might be a little better. I kind of like Hex Slingers a little bit for the Draconians or Reavers, that we can start with some combat abilities or something a little bit more useful. Maybe if I'm planning to go into magic a little bit later, probably a Reaver would be a little bit better. You do start with a few basic spells. Shapeshifter is also an option, but I'm not like a big fan of shapeshifters, at least the way it's implemented. When I've played shapeshifters before, I tended to not really enjoy them that much. So I don't really want to recommend a shapeshifter that much. Even going for something like a Wanderer or an Artificer could be pretty good. I would say maybe even an Artificer could be quite nice, because even though you don't get a bonus for evocations, you don't get a detriment either. So that could be pretty good. You start with a few wands and stuff to kind of help you out in the early game. And then once you get your color, you can break into something else later. So I would say maybe an Artificer, a Draconian Artificer could be pretty good to start off. And then, like I said, once you get your color, you can really move into focusing on your magic a bit more. Maybe even worship Sifmuna to get a more variety of spells to really become a big caster a little bit later as well. And then also having your evocations ability always in the back pocket could be quite nice to support your magic abilities a little bit. So I quite like that a lot. Like I said, I probably wouldn't even pick any of these starting classes. The only one I would pick would maybe be a Conjurer, I guess, or maybe like an Alchemist, because at least you never get a negative for your alchemy ability. So if you want to use alchemy at the beginning, you can get a few alchemy spells to start, which are quite useful in the early game. And then when you get your color, either you're going to get some other aptitudes which could help you a little bit more, or maybe if you're lucky, you get green and then you can get a big alchemy boost to become the big poison dragon, which could be pretty funny. So I would probably pick that, but I do like Artificer for a Draconian, maybe even a full fighting class like a warrior, gladiator, or something like that, or maybe something like a Reaver or Hexslinger as well would be pretty good. But I think an Artificer would be pretty fun, to be honest. Another option could be Hedge Wizard. You just get a bunch of random spells, so that could be pretty good as well. Let's take a look at the Troll. Trolls, I would say, are probably one of the most low IQ classes in the game, even more so than the Minotaur is. They have a really high strength 15, int 4, dex 5. Really low IQ with the int 4 kind of build there. They have a few things. They're large for one, so they get big dodge and evasion penalties. They also can use giant clubs and large rocks. These are something you find sometimes. They're quite powerful. They do a lot of damage. A large rock can kind of one-hit a lot of enemies, to be honest, once you get your throwing high enough. So any character that can use large rocks, I really love to level up throwing and start using those. Because especially, for example, one of my favorite classes is the Oni, which we'll talk about later. And Onis, if you level up their throwing, they can become like a large rock sniper and just like one shot, one kill a ton of enemies, which is really, really funny, to be honest. They can't wear most armor, only like hides. So like the dragon skin armors they can wear, but most other armors they can't. They also get no penalties for fighting in shallow water. If they're in shallow water, they fight basically just as normal. They don't get a penalty as many other creatures or races will. They also have tough skin, which gives them a +1 AC bonus, and shaken fur, which also gives them another +1 AC bonus, and claws, which gives them a +6 to their damage, only when using unarmed, though, I should say. They also get a passive regeneration, which is quite fast, about +0.8 HP per turn, which is very, very good. It makes them a lot more survivable, especially in the early game. However, I will say all these bonuses tend to drop off in the late game. So even though the trolls are big, they have a lot of natural armor ability, and they got the regeneration, I find they're very fragile once you get to the late game, because not being able to have armor really hurts them a lot. So you kind of want to be able to deal with that in some way. I would say, despite the fact that they seem like a class you want to be just tanking with, early game that's fine, but once you get to the mid-late game, it tends to fall off very fast. They recommend a few classes here: Fighter, Gladiator, Berserker, Warper, Earth Elementalist, and Hedge Wizard. I mean, all of these could be good, I would say. I quite like the Troll Warper, because it kind of removes the drawback of the Troll, being that they're not too mobile and they don't have a lot of armor, so it allows them to escape very quickly, so they can get in, get some good hits in, and then run away. I would also say even just a fighter is pretty good. The Troll Fighter of Wujian is one of the iconic kind of meme classes, because you don't even have to attack. You just move in the direction, and all of the kind of bonuses of Wujian kind of work together to just decimate every single thing around you, which is really, really funny. Troll Fighter of Wujian is a really funny meme build if you want to try it, and it is pretty good, to be honest. It works quite well. Really, really funny to try that out. So if you want to do that, that could be pretty interesting. But I would say if you're not going for that, I quite like the Warper for trolls, or something else that allows them to kind of be a little bit more maneuverable as well. But in general, I do like to play a melee class of the troll. They're pretty fun to just go full melee and rip everything apart as well. As for their aptitudes, they don't have that many aptitudes. They really have none. Unarmed combat is 0. That's probably the best they get, but it really doesn't matter, to be honest. You're not going to be focusing on much. They really have really poor spell casting, so if you want to get into spells, you're probably going to be stuck with a lot of low-level stuff. That's just said translocations I quite like. The only magic class that they're kind of good at is Earth Magic. That could be good as well. At least if you have Pass Wall, it allows you to escape a little bit. You can go through walls to escape, so that could be another option. Again, it's going to be hard for you to cast any high-level magic spells. So translocations, low level, or Earth Magic are both pretty good, because even the low-level options like blinking will at least help you if you're stuck in a situation where you need to escape right away and kind of break off combat and regenerate a little bit, which is kind of what you need to do in the late game. So having that option available is always quite good, and I like those options for you. And of course, going unarmed combat is great. It just suits your abilities a lot, and you can even go for like a shapeshifter if you really want to get a little bit more armor, for example. Next is the Deep Elf. Deep Elf is like the iconic, just pure mage class. They have really high int, strength 5, int 12, dex 10. I guess they could be fighters, but I've never used one as a fighter, to be honest. They have really high mana generation, ×2 mana generation versus any other class, and that's their only kind of special ability. The recommended classes are basically every single magic class. I would say definitely playing a conjurer for them is really good. This is just the iconic, I just want to be a mage, and that's it. So go for Deep Elf Conjurer, cast all the spells, worship Vemet or something, and you can be the biggest boom mage in the whole game, just blow up every single thing around you. And have a fun time, basically. So I think Deep Elf is pretty fun for that. They're really simple, just casters, but if you just want to play a caster and blow everybody up, I mean, this is the class to do it, Their aptitudes are basically what you'd expect. They have basically every single magic aptitude, except shapeshifting, but shapeshifting kind of sucks anyways. They also have a bonus for ranged weapons and dodging, as well as stealth. So that does open up some interesting ideas. If you want to play them as a ranged class, that could be an interesting option. Actually, let's go back quickly. I think honestly, if you don't want to go for just a big mage, choosing all the mage classes, I definitely think Conjurer is the best, because Conjurer gets a lot of variety of spells. And I mean, you're just going to be casting every spell. Pick all the best spells. So go for Conjurer, rather than something more specific. Though I guess if you want to focus, it doesn't really matter. However, I think if you want something a little bit more versatile, I think maybe a Hex Slinger or an Artificer could be quite good. Or even a Delver could be quite interesting as a Deep Elf, because Delvers start with a weapon. They get a big bonus to their stealth ability, which can help you as a Deep Elf. You already have a good stealth bonus, and they get some wands, which can help them out a little bit as well. So if you take a Delver, focus maybe on finding a god early, and then you can level up a little bit of your evocations to stay in the fight a little bit more, get some good experience, and then break into magic a little bit later. So for example, a Deep Elf Delver of Sif Muna I think could be pretty interesting. You'll get all the spells you could ever want. You get a lot of initial XP, so you'll level up quite quickly. You get that big stealth boost, so you can be kind of a stealthy big caster, which is kind of funny. And also you get, maybe you can train up some evocations at the beginning, and of course you get an early god. If you're lucky, you can find a god quite early as a Delver, but I can maybe talk about that a bit later. But either way, I think for a Deep Elf, if you don't want to play a mage, I mean, definitely mage is like the iconic class. Hexslinger could be pretty good to take advantage of your ranged abilities. An Artificer maybe, if you want to focus more on like artifact items, or I should say wands and stuff. Leveling up your wand evocation ability first and then break into magic later, or a Delver to get your god online a little bit earlier, and then again focus on evocations initially until you can start getting your spells online. Next is the Armataur. This is a very interesting kind of class. They have big strength, 13, int 8, and dex 5. They are deformed because they have this kind of like weird pangolin sort of body. These guys used to be, I guess, centaurs, but now they're sort of like half human, half pangolin or something. They get half armor class from armor. They get a big EV evasion and dodge penalty. They can't wear boots, but they get something called bardings instead, which is, I guess, similar. They don't get any penalties for fighting in shallow water because they're considered big or large. They have tough skin, which gives them a big bonus of +3 armor class. They also have a roll or a rampage because they're like a pangolin, or I don't know what kind of animal. What is the animal that rolls, to be honest? I guess like an armadillo, though I think pangolins also roll, because I do know pangolin in Malaysian means something like rolling or rolling animal or roller. So maybe pangolins do roll. I've just never seen a pangolin outside of the zoo. Actually, no, I have seen a pangolin before in the jungle before, so I can't say that. But I don't know if they roll. I do know armadillos roll, so maybe like an armadillo is a better example, especially for any Americans out there who've never seen a pangolin. So basically what this means is if you move in a straight line towards an enemy, you'll get an additional free move, and this is not controllable, so just you will move into them and do like a rampage move, which gives you a big bonus there. You also get an HP and MP regeneration increased after rampage for like a couple turns. After the rampage, you'll get a little bit of a bonus. So it is good to rampage. However, you do have to be careful because that rampage is uncontrollable. So sometimes you might roll into, a little bit of a dangerous situation. Or for example, if you're trying to escape enemies and you accidentally roll over the stairway, for example, and miss it, that could be pretty bad. So you do have to be a little bit careful. Try to move more diagonally or kind of zigzag pattern, I guess, if you want to avoid rolling, unless you choose to do it, because it will just happen automatically. You do have an armored tail, which gives an extra pretty beefy tail slap attack. The recommended classes for these are fighters, berserkers, warpers, and hedge wizards. I honestly think Armataur Berserker is pretty fun. It really rolls into the rampaging ability, makes them really a beastly kind of class. And I would say even more so than the Minotaur to a degree, though you do have to be a bit more careful with like your movement, for example, and other things, since you're not going to benefit as much from the kind of armor and so on. Another interesting option, I think, for Armataur could even be a Conjurer. Like, they're not terrible mages. They do have pretty low aptitudes for their magic, but they're not like awful. Like -1 is not like that bad. Most of their aptitudes are for armor, shield, and stealth. The stealth aptitude is kind of funny. I don't know how you'd actually make that work. Maybe people who know more than me could talk about how they would do that. But I think honestly they make for an interesting kind of like heavy caster. If you go for an Armataur, for example, like Conjurer or Wizard, and worship Rue, for example, you can use your Power Blast, you can use your leaping ability to kind of move around the battlefield. As for moving, maybe a Warper would also be quite good. That might be an interesting kind of stealthy idea. Maybe instead of like a stabber, you're more like an ambusher. So you use your warping abilities to position yourself, and then you just rampage at the enemy with your big heavy weapon. So again, not really focused on getting stabs in, because you're not really a great stabber, but just in terms of like ambushing. So trying to be a little bit stealthy, get a good position around the enemy, and then ambush, and then warp or blink again, and then ambush again with your rampage. So again, try to take advantage of your rampage and keep positioning yourself in places where you can rampage again and again to get that big buff. So that's would be an interesting way to do it. I think that could be pretty good. Definitely fighter is also pretty good. I like the berserker for Armataur, but I think a warper could be pretty fun as well. Kind of like an ambusher warper sort of play style. Next is the Gnoll. Gnolls are very interesting. They have pretty rounded out stats, strength 7, int 7, and dex 7. The main thing about Gnolls is they have distributed training, which means they train every skill equally at the same time. You can't choose what skills to train. They train all of them all the time. They have fangs as well, which means they get an extra bite attack, and a strong nose means they can sense nearby items on the dungeon floor they're on. These are the recommended classes for them: Cinder Acolyte, Shapeshifter, Wanderer, Warper, Hexslinger, Reaver, and Forge Right. I would say for Gnolls, I kind of like a Gnoll Wanderer. It makes it the really like perfect everyman, everything class, because you're training everything, and Wanderers kind of have a mix of just things going on for them. So it really allows you to just like be one with the dungeon in some way. Just whatever the dungeon gives you, whatever happens in the dungeon, you just take it and you absorb it. You're molded by it, you know?
You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man. By then it was nothing to me but blinding.
Born to live in the dungeon. So I think that's kind of funny. I quite like that, but really Gnolls can be successful at basically everything. I think you can do any kind of combination with a Gnoll and they will be good at it. They will be pretty interesting. They start off pretty slow because they're training every single skill at the same time, but luckily I should say, all their aptitudes are quite high. That means all their skills will train fairly quickly eventually, and once you start leveling up, their skills can be quite really high. Just the way leveling works, their skills will start to increase progressively as they go further and further. But again, I think Gnolls can really be good at anything, but I quite like a Gnoll Wanderer, or maybe for example some other adventurer class like an Artificer or Delver. I probably wouldn't go Shapeshifter. Like I said, I don't like Shapeshifters that much, at least how they're currently implemented, but I think Wanderer is really fun, and again, a really interesting class to play as a Gnoll. It's a good experience, I would say. If you want just an interesting kind of fun experience with a character in Dungeon Crawl, Gnoll Wanderer is pretty fun. And both the Artificer and the Delver are also quite fun for the same reasons, though they're a little bit more focused than the Wanderers. Wanderer is just, you get a bunch of random stuff to start with. Delver, you do get a few random things and you start at dungeon level 5. Artificer, you get a few wands and scrolls to help you survive as well. So I think all of those could be quite fun for a Gnoll. Gnolls, I think, are very suitable for all the adventurer type classes. Next, we're going to get to the intermediate races. These ones are a little bit more complex, or have bigger downsides, or again, something about them that makes them a little bit less forgiving than the simple ones. It doesn't mean they're harder or better or worse. It just means they're not so straightforward to play. First of all, as the human, which is interesting, you'd think a human would be a fairly simple class, and actually they're probably the most simple class in the whole game. Their stats are the baseline, which everyone else is based off of, 888 for everything. They have Explore Regeneration, which means they regenerate passively HP and MP by exploring new tiles, and that's it. So that's a nice little bonus, but it's a pretty minor bonus, to be honest. Their recommended classes are Berserker, Cinder Acolyte, Conjurer, Necromancer, Ice Elementalist. And they basically have no aptitudes. They have a very small aptitude for stealth and for invocations, but everything else is 0. But the thing about everything being 0 means they're also not negative. So that's very good. It means they basically get no penalties for training anything. And likewise, I think humans are the best just all-around class. Like you want to play like basically any kind of class you want to try out. Humans are a good way to try it out because they don't have any penalties for it. They kind of do everything pretty well, a little bit like the Gnoll in that way, but of course you can actually focus and develop the character the way you want versus just training everything. So I'd say the humans in a lot of ways are very similar to the Gnolls, but again, you can kind of shape the character the way you want versus Gnolls, which just continuously develop. So I would kind of pick whatever. I mean, anything could be fine. I think playing a human wizard is kind of fun, but I mean, really anything could be pretty good. I think honestly, human, maybe conjurer of Sifmuna, just so you can get all the spells. I would go like totally wizard max for the human. I think that would be pretty fun. Though again, like I said, humans can really do whatever, to be honest. You wouldn't be remiss to choose any other kind of class. Just I think I've only played humans with big wizard because they don't have any penalties for all the classes. And they're also a little bit like beefier than, for example, the deep elves are. So they're a little bit more robust, I would say, which is a little bit nicer. Let's take a look at the Kobold. Kobolds are an interesting class. They have strength 5, int 9, and dex 10. They have Night Stalker, which means their line of sight is reduced by 3 tiles, but they get a stealth bonus of 150. Now that seems bad, right? Like less line of sight, isn't that like bad? But the thing about line of sight is enemies can only attack you if they're in your line of sight. So you won't be hit by an enemy that's outside of your line of sight, unless they've already seen you. I guess they might shoot at you if they're out of sight, but they have to see you within your line of sight. So they can't see you if you're out of it. So this actually is a big benefit. This is not a drawback. This is a benefit because it makes them very hard to see, and they can sneak around enemies much easier, because if they can't see you in the line of sight or you can't see them, then they can't detect you, meaning you can sneak past them without any issue. So this makes kobolds are very good sneaky characters. They're also small, which means they get a big bonus to evasion, but they can't wield most two-hand weapons, and even some one-handed weapons are now two-handed. They also can't use big shields, and these are their recommended classes: a Brigand, Berserker, Hexslinger, Enchanter, Conjurer, and Earth Elementalist. As for aptitudes, they have pretty neutral aptitudes. Most of their fighting aptitudes are pretty weak, but they do have a big bonus for both short blades and ranged weapons, as well as a little bit for throwing, fighting, dodging, and a big bonus for stealth. They also have some bonuses for invocations and evocations, so they're quite good with any kind of wands they might find. I guess Kobold, I mean, my experience from Dwarf Fortress, Kobold's always stealing your treasures and things like that. So I guess this is their natural tendency to steal little shiny objects. They're pretty good with the wands. As for a class that'd be interesting to play, I mean, you could go for a classic kind of stabber class, play a Brigand, be very stealthy and just stab everyone. I think maybe an Enchanter or a Warper could also be quite good. I would say the Enchanter is a little bit better because they do get some spells to be invisible and make them even less noticeable, as well as to kind of support their ability to stab. Though I would also think they could play quite well as a mage. Maybe going for an Ice Elementalist would be kind of fun. That basically allows you to control the battlefield very well. You can do something like a Frozen Ramparts around you, which is a spell that causes the whole area around you to freeze, and then use some of your magic to just blast everybody around you while they're taking that kind of frost damage. So I think that could be kind of fun as a kobold, and they don't have any really negatives for any magic. I mean, you can take any kind of magic and it'll be fine. Their int is also quite high as well, so they can make a really good combination mage, a warrior mage kind of thing, but kind of a mage and a stabber at the same time. And definitely playing a stealthy character, you do need some magic eventually, because stealth starts to drop off as you get deeper and deeper in the dungeon. So definitely having some kind of magic is quite good. I quite like Kobold with Ice Elementalists, maybe Earth Elementalists as well, could be quite nice. I tend to like Ice magic more than Earth magic. At least the starting spells are better for Ice Mage, I think. And then you can find whatever spells you want later and kind of diversify and stuff. As well as Enchanter could be quite good too. Let's take a look at Demonspawn. This is actually, I think it's the most popular race to play, at least from the stats I've seen. Demonspawn is by far the #1 most popular race to play. That could be because a lot of people tend to save scum or I should say start scum with them, and they keep restarting to get kind of the mutations they want. That's one of the things iconic or unique about Demonspawn. First of all, they have pretty average stats, 888 all around the board. They're innately evil, means they can't worship any good gods, specifically Zin, Evilion. I keep mispronouncing the name, and the Shining One. They can't use the Holy Wrath brand, and they're vulnerable to holy damage. They also have demon ancestry, means they will gain random mutations as they level up, and these mutations can be unique, or they can be just generic mutations. The unique ones are all quite good. And that's the main reason why people might often restart with this. If they get a bad mutation, they tend to maybe want to restart and try again, because the mutations are based off of DNA. So that particular character you start with will always have the same mutations, for example. It's kind of like a random thing based off of your start. It's not randomly rolled at the level up. It's randomly rolled when you start the game what mutations you will get. For recommended classes are Gladiator, Berserker, Hedge Wizard, I should say, Necromancer, Fire Elementalist, Ice Elementalist, and Alchemist. I think Demonspawn can play well with quite a lot of things. They definitely benefit a lot from the mages, but it really depends on what kind of mutations you get. I mean, you never really know, and Control Q is the very popular command for every Demonspawn player to see if they can get the mutations they actually want. I was going for a Gladiator could be quite nice. You can start off the game pretty just focus on your fighting, get a few range abilities with your throwing, and maybe some kind of long weapon to augment your fighting abilities. Your stats are pretty neutral to a little bit negative for everything, which is not a big deal because demon spawns are quite strong. The only really benefit you get is with necromancy and with invocation, so definitely finding a god would be quite good. With your invocation so high, maybe even going for a delver could be quite nice, though you are going to be pretty vulnerable in the beginning of the game, but it means you can get started really powerfully. If you get lucky with your roll, I mean, what kind of mutations you get, and find the temple to get a god quite early, you pick up some XP pretty early on as a delver. I think that'd be pretty good. So I think going a Demonspawn delver could be quite fun, but going as a gladiator as well, maybe worshipping like Gozag or something could be pretty interesting. It doesn't really take much advantage of your invocations, but it could be pretty nice as well. Next is the Djinn. Now, Djinn have strength 7, int 9, and dex 8. Now, their body is made of a magical fire, which means they resist fire. They also have immunity to poison and any kind of miasma. They're weak to cold. They're unaffected by sleep because they have no blood, and they are affected by like needles and darts and stuff like that. They don't need blood to poison. They're also floating, which gives them a permanent flight, but they can't wear any boots because they don't have feet. They also get extra vitality, which means they have +4 max health points, and HP casting, which means they use their health for casting spells instead of magic, which is a really weird and interesting playstyle. It just means that you have to be very careful with using your magic spells, because if you get in a situation where you can take some very heavy damage, you can find that yourself is almost dead very quickly. But that does make them in some ways a lot easier, because you don't even have to worry about like your magic. You just worry about your health only. They also have innate magic, means they train all spell schools at once. A little bit like the Gnoll trains every class at once. Djinn do that, but just with magic spells. And also they don't learn from books, and they can't take any gods that give them spells. So no Sifmuna with this one. You have to take something else. I would say with Ashanzari is a good god for the Djinn. Djinn of Ashanzari I think is quite a good option. It kind of augments your awareness, makes you a little bit more aware since you might be a little bit low HP sometimes casting spells, and you can kind of pick or choose what you want to focus on as well. But yeah, they just kind of learn spells innately as they level up. The recommended classes are almost all mage classes: Hedge Wizard, Conjurer, Fire Elementalist, Ice Elementalist, Air Elementalist, Warper. I quite like Djinn Fire Elementalist to start, just because fire spells are quite powerful. You also have Resist Fire, which means you don't need to worry too much about getting burned or something like that. Ice, you may be affected by the cold spells, so you want to be careful, that kind of stuff. So I would say like a Djinn Fire Elementalist is quite good, and you're always going to get new spells anyway, so you can really diversify just being a big mage later in the game. So it really doesn't matter what you start with. It just defines what spells you begin the game with, because otherwise you won't begin the game with any spells, or you'll have to wait till you start learning them to pick up some new spells. At least with the Fire Elementals, you do start with a few kind of good fire spells to kind of control the battlefield, and your innate fire resistance will make that a little bit less dangerous as well. For example, if you cause an explosion or something like that. As for aptitudes, of course, all their magic abilities are very, very high aptitude. They have +11. But again, like I said, because they train all of them at the same time, they'll train quite slowly for all of them. So that will take some time. They also get a small bonus for dodging as well. But I guess that's just more for evasion. You do want to evade a little bit, because you probably are going to go for a bit lighter armor, be mostly a spellcaster. And even though your HP is quite high, you're going to be using your HP a lot for casting spells. So definitely focusing on your dodging and your evasion is quite good to do if you can. But like I said, I think something simple like a Djinn Fire Elementalist is quite fun, but really a lot of other things. They can be a pretty good warrior or something else as well if you want to focus on that too. And then you're always going to pick up spells anyways, so it's not really a big deal to diversify a little bit, for example. Next is the Spriggan. They have Strength 4, Int 9, and Dex 10. Now these guys are little, just like the Kobold. They have bonus evasion, bonus dodge, can't use most two-hand weapons. Some one-hand weapons are two-handed, and they can't use a big shield. They also can't wear most armor except robes or a hide-based armor like a dragon scale. They also have acute vision because they can see any kind of invisible enemies around them. So those really annoying orc mages that turn invisible all the time and just pester you, they can at least see them, which is good. They're also fast, which means they attack faster, they move faster, kind of like a permanent haste effect on them, which is really, really powerful because haste and being faster in this game is such a massive advantage. Now, as for classes, these guys are like the classic enchanter class that really supports their ability to be sneaky, stabbers, and definitely going with something with a fast blade, like basically any short blade or a very fast weapon that's going to take advantage of their speed abilities and really allow them to basically chop through any kind of enemies they might encounter. Another interesting option, this one's not recommended for them. The recommended, I should mention them, are Brigands, Artificers, Warpers, Enchanters, Conjurers, Earth Elementalists, and Alchemists. Another interesting option, just because they're so fast, is a Hunter, because that also affects the speed at which you can shoot your weapon. So if you have a bow or sling or something like that, you'll shoot it much faster than you would something else. Now, you won't be able to get crossbows because crossbows are two-handed weapons, but with a bow, or even just with a sling, or even with a gun, if you find a gun later, you can shoot it very, very fast. And I would say this one with the, I always can't pronounce the name of the god, but the god that lets you pick an ancestor. I'll have to look it up very quickly, how to pronounce the name. Hepliaquana. Geez, that's the hardest god to pronounce, to be honest. But a hunter taking the god Hepliaquana and taking the kind of knight ancestor or the warrior ancestor to kind of body block for you really, really can be a very easy game. I tried that recently. I heard about that playstyle, and honestly, it was really fun to play. I got down to Zot 5 and then I died, but it was still really fun. I'd like to try it again and see if I can actually do a full orb run with it. But it was really, really good. You shoot amazingly fast. You can just pelt everybody with bows, and your ally, your ancestor, again, can just kind of body block for you. And losing a little bit of health from the the ancestor god doesn't really matter anyways, because you're already pretty weak as a Spriggan. You don't really want to be fighting face-to-face with anybody. So yeah, I would say that is pretty good. You generally want to stay away from everyone. Your speed will let you kind of outrun everybody pretty easily. If you can pick up some translocation spells a little bit later. You do have a big bonus for translocation, so it does kind of seem like that's what they want to push you towards. You also get bonuses for short blades, dodging, stealth, spellcasting, hexes, alchemy, evocations, and shapeshifting. Hexes could be quite nice as well, mixing in some hexes if you're an enchanter to kind of control the enemy, or again, using warping if you're playing a warper to move yourself, control your own position in the map. Both those are quite good for pretty standard playthroughs, and like I said, a hunter, you can focus on range weapons, which you don't have any aptitude for, but you don't have any negatives for it either, so you could be quite good with it. And then maybe picking up some translocation spells a little bit later to help you with moving around. Though Hepliaquana, the ancestor god, does have some abilities that let you move around a little bit easier. For example, you can swap places with your ancestor to have them take the fight for you while you move back and pelt them with your arrows and stuff like that. Next is a Revnant. This is one of the newest classes available in the game. This came out with version 0.33, which is the current main version right now. This is one of the newest classes, I should say. They have Strength of 11, Int of 7, and Dex of 4. They're undead, which gives them a lot of different kind of innate abilities that all undead classes have. Mainly cold resistance, they resist negative energy. They're immune to poison. They're immune to torment. They can't mutate, polymorph, or shapeshift at all. They're unbreathing, means they don't breathe in water or in like smoke or anything like that. They don't sleep, they have no blood, and they can't go berserk. They're also vulnerable to any kind of dispel undead spells, holy magic, and they can't use any kind of holy brand. And of course, they can't worship any good gods. And they're also vulnerable to shatter spells. This is not for undead, but specifically for revenants. They're kind of like, I guess, a animated skeleton of sorts. So they can be shattered by a shatter spell, for example. They have a innate kind of claw, which when they're doing hand-to-hand damage will give them extra 2 damage. They have low MP, negative 20% MP, but they do have something called Spell Claws, which gives them an extra melee attack whenever they cast a spell, which is kind of interesting. Basically, if they cast a spell, they will kind of attack one enemy nearby them. Whoever has the most HP, they'll basically attack. And another thing I didn't write here, I kind of ran out of space. The Revenants have a unique ability called, I guess, Steal Memories. When they kill an enemy, they take the memories from that enemy, and they could use that to augment their magic spellcasting abilities as the game goes on. So they can become more powerful spellcasters throughout the game by killing more enemies, basically. I've never played a Revenant, so I don't have too much to say about it. These are the recommended classes for them: Gladiator, Monk, Necromancer, Ice Elementalist, and Earth Elementalist. I don't really know which would be best. Like I said, I've never played them. They're very new. Just looking at their aptitudes, though, they have an aptitude for fighting, unarmed combat, stealth, ice magic, earth magic, and invocations. I think, honestly, maybe playing a monk, maybe a hand-to-hand monk, would be pretty good. That would take advantage of their spell claw abilities, and if you can get some magic abilities later, that could be quite good. Though maybe starting with some magic might be a little bit better. So starting as some kind of mage, maybe like an ice elementalist. I quite like ice elementals for early game. I find ice elementals spells to be really good, especially early game. They do drop off a little bit later once you start getting more undead enemies. They'll resist cold a little bit more. But early game is quite powerful, and by then you should find some more spells to kind of diversify your magic portfolio a little bit more. And you can also rely on your claws for some melee fighting ability as well. So I think that could be pretty good. If I was playing a Revenant, I'd probably train unarmed, but I would take the Ice Elementalist path and also maybe work on my Ice Magic to supplement that a little bit. And eventually convert more to a hand-to-hand kind of boxing mage, I guess, a little bit later in the game. Next one on our list is a Tengu, this kind of big flying chicken type guy. They have strength of 8, int of 8, dex of 9. They have a beak and talons, which gives them 2 extra attacks with their feet and with their beak, I guess. But they can't wear boots or a helmet, which is bad. That's losing 2 armor slots. They're acrobatic, which means while they're moving or waiting, they gain plus 15 evasion, which is quite good. It's really good, to be honest. But they are very fragile. They have quite low health, and they get hit very easily. But beyond that, they're really good at basically everything. These are the recommended classes: Berserker, Reaver, Hedge Wizard, Conjurer, Summoner, Fire Elementalist, and Air Elementalist. So they do have a lot of focus on magic. Their aptitudes tend to reflect that. But they do have a lot of aptitudes for basically every combat skill. They get at least a +1 for almost everything, except throwing and shields. But those are both 0, which are also quite good. They get a few big bonuses for conjurations and summoning, as well as a little bit for necromancy, fire, and big air magic as well. So I think, honestly, they really benefit from going a mix of a warrior kind of mage, especially a very mobile warrior mage. You tend to want to stay out of direct combat because they are quite fragile. So again, going for something maybe like, I would say, honestly, I mean, their translocation spells are not great, so going for a warper might not be good, but you do want a way to be able to control combat a little bit and get out of combat if you want to. I think these guys honestly could be a pretty good air elementalist. That gives you a lot of mobility, a lot of very powerful range attacks, and again, you want to stay away from the enemy. Getting some combat damage. These guys could be pretty good warriors as well, so I wouldn't mind mixing some combat abilities like melee fighting in as well as my kind of air magic, but definitely taking some kind of ranged ability and trying to keep yourself at a distance, not get caught up in a big melee fight, is always good as a Tengu, so I would say that's pretty good. But yeah, Tengu Air Elementalist I think could be pretty easy kind of start for that. Let's talk about Oni, and Oni is probably my favorite class, to be honest. I really like Onis. They have big strength 11, int 9, which is really high for what looks like a brutish kind of class, and dex 4. They're large, which means they don't have the evasion dodge penalty. Sorry, I misspelled dodge. Can't wear most armor. They can use giant clubs and large rocks, which I mentioned before I really like. Giant clubs just like smash enemies, and large rocks, again, if you become like really good at throwing late game, you can be like a large rock sniper and just like one hit a lot of enemies. And no penalty in shallow water. They have small horns, which means they get a small extra attack, and tough skin, which means they get a small armor class boost. They also get double healing from potions, meaning any kind of MP or HP potions, they actually get 2 times the effect from it, which is really good because you are going to take a lot of damage as you can't wear armor until you can get some like dragon skin or something like that. But for most of the game, a lot of the game, you might not be able to wear any armor at all. And so getting that bonus from your healing potions is really good because it gives you a lot more survivability. You also have this ability, which is new for the Oni. Oni is a fairly new class. It came out, I don't remember when, what version. I think it was like 132 or 130. I don't remember exactly. But they used to be called Ogre, and their stats are almost the exact same. Just with Oni, they added the horns and they added the Drunken Brawling. And Drunken Brawling means whenever they drink a potion, they will get a free attack on every nearby enemy. So if you're surrounded and you chug a potion, you will get a free punch on every single enemy around you, which is quite good. It's not like super useful to build any kind of strategy out of, but it's, I don't know, it's nice. It's thematic and cool, I think. So I like that as well. And you know, it's kind of thing that I do often in the game. Sometimes I'm in the situation where I'm getting beat up by a ton of enemies and I'm just chucking potions to just like survive. And it's cool that you can at least still be attacking and getting some hits in while you're chugging the potions, you know? These are recommended classes for them: Gladiator, Berserker, Cinder Acolyte, Hedge Wizard, Fire Elementalist, and Air Elementalist. The unique thing about Oni is they're a big, beefy class, but they're great mages. Their aptitudes don't exactly reflect that. They have a big fighting aptitude bonus. Most of their other aptitudes are pretty negative. They have a decent bonus for invocations and a good bonus for spell casting. Now, all their magic skills are -1. That's not a big deal, and at least their spell casting is +1, means they will be able to cast spells quite well. So they do actually make for quite good mages. And I do like to play Onis as a mage. I think a good kind of starting class for them is getting any kind of mage class. Hedge Wizard is really fun because you get a lot of different kind of random spells, which would be very helpful. Maybe something like an Ice Elementalist. I know I've mentioned Ice Elementalist a bunch of times, but I really like playing an Oni Ice Elementalist. I think it's pretty good, and I think it's very suitable for that. Another one that would be interesting, I think, is maybe a Warper. Because you can't wear armor, you need to be a little bit more mobile. So having that translocation spell and being able to move around and at least gives you a little bit more flexibility. I would probably play a Warper. I would pick up a mace and flail kind of skill. I'd probably try to level up that skill and see if I can find a giant club and just be like the kind of anime protagonist, just warping behind the enemy and then smashing them to bits with my gigantic club, or just warping, blinking away, and then throwing a large rock at them. So I think that'd be really fun to play style. I've played that a few times. And so an Oni Warper would be pretty fun. You can even worship Sif Muna to really expand your magic spells ability a little bit later. Because your spell casting ability is quite good, even though your actual aptitudes for each magic school are a little bit weak, you still can learn every spell pretty easily and level up your spell casting quite well. So turning your Oni Warper, again, like teleports behind you, smashes you with a giant club, playstyle into a big, beefy mage late game is pretty fun. So I think that'd be pretty good. So yeah, Oni, pick a Warper, pick clubs, maces, find a giant club, find some large rocks, find Sif Muna as your god, and just have fun. You know, that'd be pretty good playstyle, I think. Barachi or a Barachi, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. These guys have decent kind of stats: strength of 9, int of 8, and dex of 7. These guys are actually giant frogs, in case you can't tell by the sprite. I didn't even know they're frogs until I was like way later, I guess, after playing this. They have far sight ability, which gives you +1 line of sight, which isn't really a good thing. It does allow you to hit enemies from further away, which is good if you want to play like a ranged character, and that's kind of how I would probably play a Barachi or a Barachi. But it also means that enemies can see you from farther away. Like I said, enemies' vision of you is based on your line of sight, not theirs. So having a larger line of sight means enemies can see you from further away, as well as you can see them from further away. They're amphibious, which means they can go in any kind of water without penalties. They're slow, which is kind of bad, but they do have strong legs. I should say slow means they attack slowly and they move slowly. They have strong legs, which means they can hop up to 4 tiles away and even over enemies and objects. Now, this kind of hop or leap works very similarly to the blink spell, except you can control the direction you want to hop in. Now, it's not totally accurate, so if I hop in one direction, I won't exactly hop to a specific square. I will just hop generally in that direction several tiles away. But again, it's good for keeping your mobility, especially because you are very slow, that you can hop out of danger and hop to a more advantageous position and kind of stay out of the main kind of fight. Now, beyond that, Barachi have very good stats. They have a lot of bonuses, aptitudes for fighting, as well as magic. They really do anything, I think. I think they do everything quite well. It really just depends on, their slow speed. That's the main issue with them. But again, all these kind of things you can really work on. You can play, for example, a warper to kind of, again, give you a bit more mobility. I like them as a ranged player. You can get a very heavy crossbow to compensate for your slow fire speed. Be like a hex slinger, so you can control your enemies a little bit more. You can hop to a better position. You can fire your big heavy crossbow at them and so on. Things that could be interesting as well. I think an alchemist could be interesting. Focus on poison spells, and again, trying to stay away from the enemies, poisoning them and hopping around them continuously could be pretty interesting. So a Barachi alchemist could also be quite good. That might be interesting to try. Now, lastly, let's talk about the advanced classes. These are the most complex classes. Again, like I said, doesn't mean they're the best or the worst or the hardest necessarily. Just they're the more complex ones, the ones that require a little bit more forethought in terms of how you want to play or how you want to approach the game. First one is the Coglin. This is also a fairly new class. I don't remember when it was added to the game. I think maybe version 0.30. But this is actually like a little goblin wearing a mech suit, which I find really, really funny. And the lore for these guys is funny too. It's just the goblin who didn't want to be bound by the weight of his own flesh.
From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me. I craved the strength and certainty of steel.
He wanted to become one with the machine. Basically, he's like the goblin tech priest or a mechanist of sorts. And now that he's built the suit for himself, he's fused with the suit, and it's sort of like a Magitech sort of device. So it is very funny. This is literally just the goblin tech priest, Magitech sort of guy. And there's a lot of things about these guys. So they have strength of 8, int 7, and dex 9. And since their body is mechanical, they can actually dual wield 2 one-hand weapons. And really, I would recommend you should always do that as a Coglin. They're really a fighting-focused class. And I would never bother using a 2-handed weapon with them or a shield. A lot of their abilities really benefit from having 2 one-handed weapons, and you're going to just be suffering by going for anything else other than 2 one-handed weapons. Wielding and unwielding is very slow, so if you ever want to switch weapons, it's very slow to do so. So again, you shouldn't really be doing that unless you're in a very safe place. They also have something called warm-up strike. So because their body is mechanical, they can equally use both arms, meaning both arms are totally perfect for using weapons. That's why they can do dual wielding. But they're also slower to like rev up, get the machine going, I guess. So for their first strike, they're going to have a negative 33% damage penalty, but that's reduced to 0 by striking continuously for a short time. So as long as you're attacking for a couple turns, that damage penalty will go away. And again, if you're using 2 one-handed weapons, the amount of damage from both weapons will kind of compensate for that damage penalty. And of course, it will ramp up as you're attacking continuously. So if you're in a big fight and you're attacking many, many enemies around you, that will quickly become very overwhelming as you're able to just like shred them with your 2 weapons. But even for like a single target, having 2 one-hand weapons will kind of compensate for the damage penalty for your initial strike. So definitely Coglins are not good stabbers. Stabbers really need to have high single target damage, and these guys do not have it. They really rely on getting multiple hits in to actually ramp up their damage a little bit. Another thing is they can't wear any jewelry, which is the biggest downside, I would say, because jewelry is the best way you can really augment your characters throughout the game, get a lot of resistances to certain kind of effects or bonuses to certain stats. Not having that is a really big drawback for Coglins. It's something, I guess, due to their magical mechanic body. The magic from the jewelry kind of gets mixed up with that magic, and it makes the machine not work. So that's why they can't wear jewelry. However, they do have something called Invent Gizmo. So at level 14, they gain the ability to create a gizmo, which can be installed in their robotic body for a buff. And these gizmos, at level 14, you'll get a choice of 3 different random gizmos. And they will have a lot of different abilities for each gizmo, although you have to pick one of them, whichever one you think is the best for you. But they are, I guess, equivalent to having a full set of jewelry in some way. So by around level 14, that's around mid-game, you'll get that big buff from your gizmo to get a lot of resistances. You do have to plan ahead a little bit which gizmo you want to pick. It is random, but that does somewhat compensate for not having any jewelry. But of course, you can't remove the gizmo and swap it out. You also can't be as picky as you can with jewelry, where jewelry you can kind of swap the rings in and out and pick certain things. You're kind of stuck with whatever gizmo you randomly get. Now, these are the recommended classes for the Coglin: Gladiator, Hunter, Berserker, Artificer, Warper, Forgerite, and Alchemist. Out of these ones, I've not played Coglin too much. I've played Coglin Gladiator and I quite enjoyed it. Like I said, they really benefit from having just 2 weapons all the time. And I find the thrown weapons like the nets of the Gladiator are good for helping to control the battlefield a little bit and debuff the enemy. I would also say, honestly, maybe an Enchanter could be quite good. Now, you do start with a dagger, but you would be able to get 2 daggers, have 2 weapons. I wouldn't play it like a stabber, but use the Enchanter's hexes to kind of control the enemies a little bit and kind of augment them a little bit like that. Another thing would be interesting is a Hunter. Because you can use 2 one-handed weapons, you can use 2 one-handed range weapons. So early game, that would be a sling only. But late game, if you can find a gun, you could basically become the Arizona Ranger with the big iron on your hip, except that you have 2 big irons and just shred every single person in the dungeon. Make it more like Enter the Gungeon instead of Dungeon Crawl, to be honest. So that would be pretty fun to playing a Hunter. Pretty funny playing a Hunter, having the dual range weapons and just like pelting everybody with your 2 guns or something like that. That'd be pretty interesting to try that. So I think that'd be pretty fun. I think maybe a Hexslinger or Enchanter could also be quite good. Or anything else, really. I think Coglins can do quite a lot of things. Just generally, you want to be combat focused, combat forward focused, while maybe having some magic as a support skill a little bit later. In terms of their aptitudes, they don't really have any aptitudes except for Forgecraft, Alchemy, and Evocations. They have a big Evocations aptitude, which does make something like Artificer a little bit tempting. They do get a bunch of wands at the start of the game that could really augment their evocation skills, which is quite nice. But again, it's really up to you. I think maybe something with more ranged abilities like Hexslinger or Enchanter to mix in a little bit of magic with your dual-wielding one-hand weapons, especially some really fast weapons like 2 short blades as an Enchanter, for example, I think could be quite good. Next is the Vine Stalker. Vine Stalkers have 10 strength, 8 int, and 9 dex. Vine Stalkers are kind of superficially similar to the Spriggans, but have some notable differences. For one, they're a little bit bigger than the Spriggan. They're normal size. They have fangs, so they get an extra bite attack. Look at his big mouth. I like the big gaping mouth of the Vine Stalker. Like he's just going to take a bite out of everybody. They also have an anti-magic bite. So their bite attack is, for one, it's more likely to trigger than other kind of accessory attacks. And whenever they bite an enemy, it applies anti-magic to them. So it means they can't like cast magic and they get debuffed a little bit. It also restores your MP. So every time you bite someone, your MP is restored a little bit. You also get no healing from potions, which is a really big drawback because taking a potion to heal is one of the easiest ways to get out of trouble when you're in a tough situation. You can chug your potion of curing or your potion of healing, something like that. And then you can obviously recover, but you can't do that with the Vine Stalker. They do have a regeneration ability similar to the Troll, about 0.8 health per turn, which is quite good. But again, it doesn't really affect anything if you're hit with very big single target damage. So it's fine if you're taking a lot of chip damage, but if something hits you really hard, that regeneration is not going to save you and you're not going to be able to heal from a potion. They also have something called Spirit Shield, which means they share their damage between their MP and their HP, which actually gives them almost like 2 health bars, which is really, really good. You have basically a gigantic health bar. But again, like I said, it makes them also very vulnerable to one big damage attack. So you do have to be a little bit careful, especially what enemies you might encounter. I think a funny playstyle for this one, well, let's take a look at the recommended options. Fighter, Brigand, Berserker, Enchanter, Conjurer, Necromancer, and Ice Elementals. I think, honestly, Vine Stalker is a great fighter. Their bite attack and the speed at which they bite is really good, and if you really focus on leveling up your dexterity, using a really fast weapon like a quick blade or a short blade, and getting lots and lots of fast attacks in, you're going to be biting constantly, and you're going to be regenerating your MP, which, remember, your MP is also part of your health. So you're going to be constantly regenerating health. You can take a god like Uskaya, the dancing god, and just continuously dance around the enemies, take lots and lots of hits on them, take lots and lots of MP health, and really control the battlefield, and just walk your way through the game, basically. Like, I think that could be an amazing playstyle and a very interesting kind of build. So a Vine Stalker fighter, focus on very quick attacks, worship Uskaja, and maybe take some magic later if you really want to, something to give you a quick get out of jail free card, like if you can get some translocations or something like that. For aptitudes, their aptitudes are all quite good. So I think a Vine Stalker can really do anything quite well. You can see all their magic aptitudes are pretty neutral, but I've never played them as a mage. I think their kind of bonuses just suit a fighter really well, like a very fast fighter specifically, even though all their fighting aptitudes are quite low. I mean, -1 is not really a big deal. They do get a bonus for stealth, but I find their focus on wanting to get lots of bites. I feel like getting lots of bites is the best thing, so I don't really want to be stealthy with them, even though it seems like they would be a good stealthy character. I feel like playing a fighter would be a little bit better in that way. And fighter over Berserker, because I would like to pick a different god rather than Trog, to be honest, but I guess they could be a good Berserker as well. Next one is another very new class, the Poltergeist. This is new with the current version of the game. They have Strength 4, Int 10, and Dex 9. I don't have much to say about them because, again, they are very new and I've never actually played them before. They're undead, so they have all the undead bonuses we talked about before. Cold, negative energy resistance, poison, torment immunity, can't mutate, unbreathing, vulnerable to dispel undead, and holy magic, can't worship any good gods. They're also floating, means they're constantly flying, so they can float over any kind of terrain, take no negatives from the terrain below them. They're formless, because they're a ghost, which means they can use any combination that fits in their 6 slots of hats, helmets, gloves, boots, and cloaks, and scarves, up to 6 slots, but they can't wear armor. But basically what this means is that if you want to wear like 6 hats, go for it, you know? Whatever random stuff you find in the dungeon, if you find 2 pairs of enchanted boots, you could wear them. It doesn't matter. So you can have pretty good armor throughout the game if you mix these things well. If you want to wear like 6 enchanted magic helmets, that's fine, you know, great. So that's kind of nice if you find like an artifact, I don't know, boots or something, and then you find like another artifact boots, that's also quite good. You can just wear 2 boots, you know, it doesn't matter. Can't wear armor, which is bad, but again, if you mix and match the other items quite well and you enchant them a little bit, you can get up your armor class anyways. They also have this ability Trickster, which is pretty interesting. It means they gain armor class when nearby monsters are debuffed. And this is interesting as well as the fact that one of their recommended classes is the Chaos Knight. And I believe this is the only race in the game that recommends a Chaos Knight to play. And I mean, they're also recommended Hexslinger, Enchanter, Necromancer, Ice Elementalist, Earth Elementalist, and Alchemist. I'd say out of all of these, I really like the Enchanter because you purposely can debuff your enemies, as well as the Hexslinger, you can debuff your enemies around you, which is, again, you get more armor from debuffing. But honestly, I feel like a Poltergeist Chaos Knight would be really fun to play because Zom loves giving debuffs. He debuffs all the enemies around you. If you're using a Chaos brand weapon, which is common when you're playing Chaos Knight, that will also give your enemies debuffs. So again, that will give you more armor. So I feel like that just synergizes so well with the Trickster ability and the fact that Zom loves to do tricky things. It just works really well. So I feel a Poltergeist Trickster Chaos Knight is such a good combination, though I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know if it actually is good. These are your aptitudes. You have an aptitude for throwing, short blades, dodging, stealth, hexes, necromancy, alchemy, ice magic, and air magic. So definitely, I would say picking up some hexes is quite good, though hexes tend to fall off in terms of their usefulness into the late game. Throwing is also a good option. I would say getting a Chaos Knight, picking up some throwing abilities, using some of your stealth, being like a stealthy kind of Chaos Knight might be kind of interesting. Almost like a Chaos Stabber of sorts, which is kind of funny. But you know, it could be pretty interesting. And then you can switch to another kind of weapon besides your short blade to actually combat. Maybe have a long blade as well. If you're in like a tricky situation, you can switch from your short blade to your long blade to actually fight a group of enemies. Next one is the Demigod. Now, Demigods have pretty good stats. They have Strength 9, Int 10, and Dex of 9. The main thing about the Demigod, they're otherwise very, very simple class. But they can't worship any gods, which you may think that's not a big deal, but the gods are such an amazing kind of like get out of trouble card you can play at any time, that not having them is a really big detriment, I would say. It does make the class a lot harder because you're just losing that kind of free bonus that every other class gets. They have high MP, they have plus 10% magic power. They have divine attributes, which means they gain plus 4 stat boosts every 3 levels instead of plus 2 every 6 levels. So they're going to naturally have very, very high stats. However, they do level a little bit slowly, so they tend to be a little bit under-leveled, but usually not too much, maybe like 1 or 2 levels below what an other class might be. And that's it, basically. These are the recommended classes for them: Shapeshifter, Conjurer, Fire Elementalist, Ice Elementalist, Air and Earth Elementalist. I don't know what would be the best for them. I feel like they could really do anything. Demigods are really good at everything. They could have amazing stats. Their attributes are all universally -1 pretty much. So they're kind of normally a little bit weak at everything, but -1 is not a big deal. So honestly, even though they recommend these things, I would say you could do anything really well with a Demigod. I find the adventurer classes are quite fun with the Demigod, especially a wanderer or a delver. A Demigod delver, you're going to level up quite quickly. You're going to start with some good things, and you can start getting maybe some better gear a little bit earlier, or even a Demigod artificer to rely on some artifacts a little bit earlier in the game and level up your invocation spell. Since you're not going to have a god, you're going to want to make use of every single thing you find, including all the wands and evocables you pick up in the dungeon. So something like that would be pretty good. But yeah, I think a Demigod Wanderer or Delver Artificer could be pretty fun. And these gives you a lot more flexibility to really do whatever in the game. Demigods really benefit from having a wide variety of things they want to focus on, like fighting, magic, ranged, things like that, evocables, rather than really hyper-focusing on one thing. Next one is the Formicid. Formicids are a giant ant-like creature. They have strength of 12, int of 7, and dex of 9. They have antennae, which allows them to sense nearby monsters, even through walls, as well as see invisible. They can't wear helmets because of this. They have 4 arms. That means they can use a 2-handed weapon in one hand, as well as a shield. They can also use giant clubs without any issue, and they can wear 2 pairs of gloves. They can also dig through walls and down floors. Meaning they can dig through a wall to cut through it, or down a few floors they can shaft themselves, meaning they drop down a few floors, and this is their only escape ability because of this reason: stasis. Stasis means they're immune to all movement effects like blink, teleport, haste, and slow, which is both good and bad. It's good because enemies can affect you by any kind of movement effects, or some malevolent force in the dungeon won't randomly teleport you or shaft you, but also means that you lack these kind of abilities to quickly move yourself around, which is one of the best ways to get out of trouble. If you're in a difficult situation, teleport away. You don't have that option as a Formicid, so you do need to use your digging ability to get away, as well as if you're really stuck, maybe shaft down a few floors and try to make your way back up. These are the recommended classes for them: Fighter, Hunter, Hexslinger, Forge, Right, Earth Elementalist, and Alchemist. I really like playing a Formicid Fighter. I think they just work really well with that. They're great, just a very strong, beefy sort of character, and you can mix in some throwing as well. Hexslinger could also be quite good. I think a Hunter is also quite good as well, but I prefer a Fighter, and then focusing a little bit on some ranged abilities to kind of augment, rather than focus on ranged first. I think they make really good fighters, and the fact that they can use a 2-handed weapon and a shield makes them really, really deadly kind of fighters as well. These are their aptitudes: +1 for fighting, +1 for armor, +3 for shields, +3 for stealth, +2 for hexes, translocation, alchemy, earth, invocations, and evocations. So a lot of what you'd expect. I don't know why they have the translocation bonus, because they can't translocate themselves, but I guess it is interesting if you want to translocate enemies. For example, if you want to bring them closer to you, or move them to a position that's further away from you, for example. So controlling their positions rather than yours is an interesting thing you can do as Formicids, I guess. Next one is Naga. Nagas have strength of 10, int of 8, and dex of 6. They're deformed, means they have half AC from armor. They're kind of like the Armataur. They have the half body of the giant snake. They have an EV dodge penalty. They can't wear boots. They wear bardings. There's no penalties in shallow water. They also have tough skin, and they gain more armor as they level up. Their skin gets tougher and tougher. They have a poison spit attack, and they also resist poison, as well as acute vision, meaning they can see invisible, and they're very, very slow. I think they're like one of the slowest classes in the whole game. Starting around level 13, they can also constrict enemies, means they can, while they're attacking an enemy, they'll hold them, which lowers their dodge and evasion and makes it easier to hit them, and also does some damage as well. These are the recommended classes for them: Berserker, Shapeshifter, Warper, Enchanter, Alchemist, Fire Elementalist, or Ice Elementalist, and Hedge Wizard. I think honestly the iconic class for a Naga is Alchemist. Naga, Alchemist, and worship Brados, the super slow snail god. Just be slow max, wear the heaviest armor you can, poison everyone around you, spit at everyone, and just be like a slithering tank, slugging your way through the dungeon. That would be kind of fun too. Nagas can do other things too. I mean, Shapeshifter could be pretty good as well, but I think Naga Alchemist is really the iconic class. Just fully go into your slowness, embrace your slowness, and kind of maximize it. These are their attributes. They don't have that many. Alchemy, Invocations, and Stealth is about it. So they do have a small alchemy bonus, and it does make alchemy a little bit more useful. Now, alchemy, like I said, tends to drop off as the game goes on. As poison resistance becomes more of a thing, it becomes less useful. But by then, you should have more variety of magic, so you can kind of go into some other things as well. Octopodes. Octopodes are a very interesting class, very popular as well. I think they're one of the most popular classes, but they're also one of the highest for dying and failing in the dungeon. Strength of 7, int of 10, dex of 7. They can't use any armor at all except shields and a hat. They can wear up to 8 rings, and I think this is the one thing that attracts everybody. Like 8 rings, oh my god, like I need to play an Octopode. I can have all these rings, I can resist everything, I can do everything, you know? People think that, and then they get squished on like dungeon level 5 or something, you know? They have a gelatinous body, which means they get +1 to both their armor and evasion. They have camouflage, which gives them an innate +40 stealth. They also have this ability constrict, same as the Naga. They can grab enemies, which reduces their dodge and evasion and does some damage to them. But they can also constrict up to 8 enemies at once, which actually makes them really good fighting characters if you can deal with their kind of innate weakness of their body and the fact that they can't wear any armor. They have an extra tentacle squeeze attack, as well as an extra tentacle slap attack, and they're amphibious, means they can go through any kind of water, but they also get a big stealth bonus in water as well. Now, these are the recommended classes for them: Brigand, Shapeshifter, Hedge Wizard, Conjurer, Fire Elementalist, Earth Elementalist, and Alchemist. Though one thing I think is interesting for an Octopode would be a Delver, because Delvers get an additional big stealth bonus, which on top of the stealth bonus that Octopodes already have is quite good. And it means you can also find maybe a god quite early to suit you. Maybe you want to play a Octopode stabber or fighter, whatever you want to do with it. I think going focusing more on dex than strength is a little bit better. Being kind of like a dex fighter as an Octopode kind of works a little bit more. Since you can't wear armor, at least you can level up your evasion a little bit more. But going for a Delver is pretty good. You'd be very stealthy, try to be very stealthy, and pick some targets in the early game. See if you can find the temple, pick a god that's suitable for you, whatever god you think will be great for your play style, like Dithmenos if you want to be sneaky, or whatever else you might want to choose. And so that I think could be quite useful. But really anything could be quite good. Octopodes could do a lot of things quite well. I think the most popular is Shapeshifter, but again, I'm not a big fan of Shapeshifters. These are aptitudes. They don't have that many, just for alchemy, stealth, invocations, and evocations. Next is the Felid. Felids are also quite popular class, but they're also, I would say, one of the hardest classes in the game, by far the hardest class. They have strength of 4, int of 11, and dex of 11, and they're a tiny cat, meaning they do have bonus EV and dodge. They can't wear any armor at all. Can't wear anything. No thumbs mean they also can't wield any weapons, can't throw anything, but they can use a wand. I guess they put the wand in their mouth or in their tail or something, I don't know. But they basically can't use anything, which really sucks. They do have claws, which give them +2 damage for unarmed, and fangs, which give them an extra bite attack. So it does mean that at least your unarmed will be not too bad. They have acute vision, meaning they can see invisible, and shaggy fur, which at least gives them a gracious +1 armor class. Not that they're going to do much, since Felids basically die in one hit, to be honest. But they do have something called extra lives, means they start the game with 1 extra life, meaning if they die, they will respawn somewhere else on the floor. And they gain a new extra life every 3 levels, and they can store up to 2 extra lives, meaning that's the maximum they can have stored. But if they lose those lives, of course, they will gain a new one in the next 3 levels and so on. But it means that even though Felid's dying like 1 hit, at least that 1 hit might not be actually the end of their game. Now, these are the recommended classes for them: Berserkers, Shapeshifters, Enchanters, Conjurers, Summoners, Ice Elementalists, and Air Elementalists. I mean, a Felid Summoner, I feel like, is the iconic way to play this class, to be honest. You don't want to be in combat with anybody. I feel like a Felid Berserker would be a gigantic meme. I've never tried it. I think it would be fun to try, but Felid Summoner, just summon everything. Fill the whole screen with allies. You know, you can even worship Jivia or something, get slimes supporting you, and then the whole screen will just be your allies, and you don't even need to worry about getting attacked, getting one-shot by anybody anymore at that point, to be honest. So yeah, go with Felid, pick a summoner, just summon all the guys, and don't even worry anymore. For their attributes, they have dodging, stealth, hexes, translocations, and evocations. So a lot of decent bonuses. I would also level up unarmed combat a little bit, but again, focusing on summonings I think is quite good. Even though they give bonuses for translocations and such, I feel like going for a summoner would be a little bit better than anything else. Last class of all is the Mummy, the most iconic class of the game, and another one of my favorites, I would say. Strength 11, Int 7, Dex 7, their stats are not too bad. They're undead, so they have all the undead bonuses we mentioned before. Cold resistance, negative resistance, poison, torment, can't mutate, unbreathing, can't go berserk, vulnerable to dispel undead, can't use holy magic, can't worship good gods, and so on. They're also vulnerable to fire. I guess being wrapped in like some kind of wrapping makes you weak to fire. They have innate faith bonus, means they get plus 25% piety growth from gods, as well as they receive gift from the gods 33% more often. So picking a god that can benefit from that piety boost is really good for the mummy. Some gods that are popular with mummies, like Gozag, they don't work with piety, so that kind of loses this ability. They get increased spell power with necromancy as they level up. So their necromancy spells become more powerful, which I guess is a little bit of a bonus, but not much. The biggest drawback about mummies, they can't drink potions. Potions are so useful. They're amazingly important throughout the game. And the fact that the mummy can't drink them immediately makes the mummy really, really weak as a class. And that's why some builds like the Muck, M-O-C-K or M-U-C-K, the Mummy Chaos Knight, or the Mummy Monk of Nothing, the Mummy Atheist, are so iconic because you just can't do anything. If you get confused or something like that, you're just like fucked. Sorry. So that makes the Mummy a really fun meme class, but also, yeah, they have a lot of problems with that. These are the recommended classes for them: Cinder Acolyte, Hedge Wizard, Conjurer, Summoner, Necromancer, Ice Elementalist. I think, honestly, a Mummy Cinder Acolyte is pretty good. It's fairly easy. It does counteract the fire resistance problem that mummies have. If you're worshipping Ignis, Ignis gives you a fire resistance boost. However, as soon as you abandon Ignis, that's going to be gone. But hopefully by then you could deal with your fire magic a little bit better. But early game, it'll make you a little bit more survivable, which is nice. And it does benefit from your faith bonus because you'll actually start with a very big amount of faith with Ignis, which means you can use them for a little bit longer, which is quite nice. A Necromancer, of course, is good. You get bonus for your necromantic spells. Of course, the iconic class for Mummy is the Mummy Monk of Nothing. So being a Mummy Monk Atheist is like the most painful and dreary class you could ever imagine. It's like one of the iconic meme challenge classes, something that I think a few people have achieved, but to be honest, I've never been able to do before. It's really difficult and really just insane to play. Now, as for aptitudes, they basically have none. They have a small aptitude for spell casting, and that's it. They basically suck at everything else, like mummies suck at everything. So playing a mummy is just painful, and their bonuses are not really enough to counteract their drawbacks, to be honest. But they are pretty fun in general otherwise. Now, for recommendations, I'll talk about a few recommendations. Basically, what I'd recommend for someone who's fairly new to the game or wants a very basic, straightforward sort of class. First of all, I would say maybe a Minotaur fighter. Mifi is a good, basic, low IQ kind of class. You just get the big weapon, get a big two-handed axe, get some big heavy armor, and just chop everything up. And that's it. You know, worship Okiwaru, and you'll basically have no problems, I think, for a 3-rune run, to be honest. Like, this is a really strong, good class, and pretty easy, and I think a lot of people have started the game playing as a Minotaur fighter or a Minotaur berserker as well. But I feel like the fighter's a little bit more forgiving than the berserker. Berserker is a little bit technical, has a little bit more thought put into it. Fighter is a little bit more low IQ. So I would say for someone just starting the game, Minotaur fighter, try that, you know, have fun chopping everything up and just destroying everybody. For a little bit more in-depth classes, if you want to start getting away from melee into like magic or maybe like stealthy stabbing kind of builds, something like a Djinn would be pretty interesting for a magic caster, maybe a Djinn Fire Elementalist. And of course, you can get lots of other spells later since Djinn passively learn spells. It does make managing your MP a lot easier because they just have MP, and they will get basically every spell eventually, so you'll have lots and lots of spells to choose from. So you can try out a lot of different magic abilities. You'll have pretty decent magic skills, a lot of magic pool to draw from since you're drawing from your HP, and again, a lot of very easy spell casting abilities. So I think Djinn are a great spellcaster class, maybe playing Djinn Fire Elementalist. If you want more of a sneaky class, maybe a Spriggan Enchanter is pretty good. Some hexes to control the battlefield a little bit, and of course a very fast blade to take advantage of your quick speed. That's quite nice as well. Maybe something else like a Warper also could be quite good, but I think the Spriggan's quite nice, a forgiving stabber class to play. Lastly, for a very difficult class or a more difficult class, maybe something like a Demigod Wanderer. Demigod Wanderer could also be quite good. Like I mentioned before, demigods don't get... they can't worship any gods, so you're really reliant on what the dungeon gives you. And playing a Wanderer is a very random start, so you kind of have to use what you start with and just do whatever based on what you find. But I feel like demigods work well with that because of how great their stat growth is and how well they can adapt to any kind of play style. So I think a Demigod Wanderer works really well for this. As well as I mentioned before, an Octopode Delver could be quite interesting. An Octopode Delver, you get that big stealth bonus from your being an Octopode as well as being a Delver. And then you can find the temple to get a god really early, pick some interesting god, and really get started with a very powerful kind of dex fighter sort of playstyle, or a stabber playstyle, or a mixed kind of mage fighter playstyle pretty early. So I think these are both pretty good. A little bit more complicated classes, but pretty fun to play. And that's basically it, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was just me going through all the different classes and races of Dungeon Crawl. Again, hope you learned something new about it. Enjoy, guys. See you again next time. And remember, guys, if you like the kind of content I make here, remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. But either way, guys, I'll see you again next time. So goodbye, everyone.